Hello. We're going to try something a little different this time. What we're going to see is an edited playthrough that I just did of GoldenEye 007 for the N64. However, I'll be playing it through my Xbox Series X for a couple of reasons. But instead of doing a live commentary, this is added after the fact so that you don't get to see the many times that I screwed up on some of these levels. Through this, I'm going to try to make this as interesting as possible, do a little bit more of an analysis of the game as we play it, as well as just have some fun. This is a very casual, laid-back playthrough of mine. I'm not trying to go through and get any of the cheats or do any of the achievements on the thing. This is just, let's go ahead and play the game based off of the secret agent difficulty, which I will be doing here. So let's go ahead and get started. Who doesn't get excited about this combination of logos with this music? I mean, maybe it's just because I grew up in the 90s into the 2000s, but every time I see this combination of imagery with this music, oh my gosh, it works so well for me. And then we have the magnificent gun barrel. I think this is the first 3D James Bond video game that they ever did, and so getting to see a gun barrel realized as close to the films as this in 1997 is just something that's the perfect way to get us into a Bond video game. And obviously, it doesn't do the title sequences like Maurice Binder or at this time Daniel Kleinman would do, but it's still kind of cool to get an idea of your cast of characters or whatnot. And I am going to let this play out just for nostalgia's sake, I guess. One of the things I'm most impressed about with this game is how accurately it captures the look of the film. You know, yeah, this was released 2 years after the film was, this was released 2 years after the film came out, but it was in development while the movie was still being made, so the developers did get to go to the sets a couple of times, do some pictures for reference material, and yeah, I'd say they nailed it with just how good this looks, how closely it resembles both the look and feel of it. So as you can see here on the files screen, I have already done this all the way through. I regularly play on 00 Agent, but for this case, because we're going to do something more casual, I am going to make it just Secret Agent, and we'll start with a brand new file here with Damn. Probably one of the most iconic opening levels ever. Now, given that this is the N64, you have spatial limitations or whatnot, it kind of makes sense that they don't do voiceovers for these sorts of things. I don't remember a lot of games from this time having that, and yet James Bond's antics are still based off of stories. They're not necessarily the most fleshed out of stories, but you still need some context for what you're doing here. And so I love that instead of just keeping it all within the manual, that they do these little briefing things right before. This is one of the best opening shots in a video game ever. And here we are, off to do this. I remember being super stoked when this game was announced that it was going to be making a comeback. We had been waiting 25 or more years to see this game again on some sort of other system than the N64. And while it made sense, it was an exclusive title there, they had several opportunities over the years to bring this game back for other Nintendo, or in this case, Microsoft, because not too long after this game, Rare was bought by Microsoft. I believe it happened after the release of Perfect Dark, the spiritual successor to this game, which will come up a couple of times here. Man, don't you just love how the game's geometry sometimes just messes with your movement a little bit and you just kind of phase in and out. It's great. But particularly what made it exciting was that it wasn't just going to be on the Nintendo Switch, which I didn't have yet. it was also going to be on the Xbox. And I was a little worried because it seemed like it was going to be an online-only subscription title for both systems. And I was like, oh man, I don't want to have to pay a monthly fee just to be able to play this game. But I did notice in some of the initial advertising that if you owned a digital copy of Rare Replay, you would be able to get the game without doing the subscription thing. And I already owned Rare Replay. I bought it in a double pack with Gears of War Ultimate Edition, but I was perfectly happy to pay upwards of at least $20 in order to have this game. That's just how much I love Bond, how much I love this game. And so when I went and looked at buying the digital version of Rare Replay, it was only about $8 at the time. Like, it happened to be on sale when this game was announced. So I was like, yeah, this is a no-brainer. I'll just go ahead and do that. And waited several months for this. It didn't come out until January 26th or the 25th. I think it was supposed to be the 26th, which I was just, or the 27th. It was sometime around there. But I was just super excited about that because that's actually, because my birthday is around that time. And so the night of my birthday, I was ready to get to play this the next day. So I guess it was supposed to come out January 27th. But at about 6 or 7 o'clock the night before, this game started downloading. And so just that night, my wife and I were watching our usual movie or TV show, and we just decided, no, I need to sit down and play this. And so for the rest of the night, I was just playing through the game on Agent, then starting to play through it on Secret Agent, getting all the achievements. It was just a glorious time. I was so stoked to be able to have this back and just regularly available. Right now, I do own a PlayStation 5, a Nintendo Switch 2, and an Xbox Series, and kind of the benefits of not having kids. And I actually tend to play on the Xbox Series more than anything else. One, backwards compatibility. Most of my games I bought from the original Xbox through to the Xbox One era, so it was nice not to have to dump everything when the series came out. But also, in terms of all the controllers, the Xbox Series controller is the one that feels the most comfortable to me out of all of the modern options, so I was really happy to be able to do this here. I can't really speak intelligently as to the differences between this and the N64 original. I can't really speak to what we should have probably expected from a re-release or whatnot. This is a very bare bones re-release. It's the game, the multiplayer. It's not even online on the series version. And they didn't include the cheat codes that, the prompts that you could do. You had to unlock them legitimately. And certainly there's definitely edges where you can see the skyboxes behind it or whatnot. And I do remember those being there in the original version. It would have been nice if they had bothered to, I don't know, touch this up a little bit. Or better yet, also release the Xbox Live Arcade version so that we could at least have both. Because I think I remember that was supposed to be running the two graphic engines at the same time. Kind of like Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary. So you could go back and forth between the old graphics and the new graphics. So just call me a sucker, I guess. I was just so happy to be playing this game that none of that really mattered to me. And even to this day, I sort of side with the people that's like, no, this really should have been more of a thing. At the very least, let me be able to purchase it outside of the Rare Replay thing. Give me a physical version or something so that I don't have to worry about that. I don't know. It is what it is. I've kind of learned to live with it. You pick and choose your battles when it comes to video games, and I think there are more worthy battles to fight right now, particularly in terms of video games. So here we are on Facility, which is one of the most iconic levels in video games to me, and I certainly played this a whole bunch. And even in the multiplayer, this is one of the maps that I don't think lends itself quite as much to a whole bunch of openness or allowing us to come up with a whole bunch of different tactics or whatnot. But maybe because it was the claustrophobic 1 or 2 lane nature of this place in the multiplayer that I actually ended up playing this a lot. And yeah, my favorite way to play this level is with proximity mines and just watching people walk into your own traps. Or sometimes you forget where the proximity mines are and you walk in your own traps. There's just so much fun to be had there. Seriously, look at this level detail. Just how closely it resembles the architecture from the movies. Peter Lamont did a pretty good job in updating the series for the 90s, and I mean, there's not much more that you need to do. It almost feels like they just took the blueprints from the movie from time to time and just constructed it in their game engine. It works really well. I do find I have to put on different hats as I play this game, because sometimes I am going for the time trials or whatnot, and there's a bit of a different skill set that you put on with that, and there's a whole lot more trial and error in order to do that. I'll talk more about earning each of these cheats on certain levels. But here, just watching it as I was playing, but even as I was playing it, I just always had in the back of my mind that, like, you're getting close to the time limit, you're getting close to the time limit, and I had to shut it up because the whole point of this was just to let me casually play through this. It's been a few months since I put this in. I've been doing a whole lot of other games, have quite the backlog, so it was fun to devote an afternoon to playing through this. It doesn't matter how many times I push the A button or anything like that. Just sometimes the door will not open until I'm in the right spot. That's probably one of those quality of life changes that could have been improved with a remaster, but at the same time, it kind of endears itself to me because it really puts me back in the feel of the 90s video game era. By the way, I love being able to just detonate mines in the air with a couple of button combination. This trick in particular, detonating mines in the air, is really, really helpful when you're doing the time trials, particularly for this one. So, facility on 00 Agent, you have to do it, I think it's like 2 minutes and 5 seconds. This is by far one of the hardest ones to do, and you get invincibility for doing it. Part of the problem with it is because of just one objective, and you're going to see me complete that objective here. Meeting Dr. Doak. He appears in one of 7 locations, but it's randomly generated. And some of the locations are a little off the beaten path. And that, oh man, that makes it really frustrating because 2 minutes and 5 seconds, even if you're not talking to Dr. Doak, is a little tough to pull off, even on agent difficulty, I find. And so if Dr. Doak just happens to appear in the wrong location, you're screwed, and you gotta do this over and over again. If you go to the stat cards on the Xbox system, where it tells you like how long you've played, how many of your friends have played, how many achievements you've unlocked, etc., one of the stats for this game is how many times have you attempted facility on 00 Agent. And so my first time playing through this on the Xbox Series, I hadn't actually beaten the game above Secret Agent, so it was my first time doing 00 Agent, like as a serious thing without the cheats put on or whatnot. It took me more than 30 times over a couple of days where this was just my sole focus. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a whole lot of trial and error through this thing. And sometimes you wouldn't even know until like the very end if you were that close or whatnot. And on 00 Agent, because you have to be moving so fast and these guards take so much out of your health pretty quickly, and as you go up on 00 Agent, some of the levels take away some of the body armor for you. You can start to figure out, if you've never done it before, you can start to figure out how this is a really tough thing to pull off. But I definitely did have to do, had to look online, watch a couple of walkthroughs to see how they were doing it. And it turns out, like, the only real thing that I could do to speed up my time was learn the mine detonating an air trick, which I already knew how to do on the N64, so just out of curiosity, I tried the same kinds of buttons on the Xbox Series, and it worked the first time, and it blew up in my face. So I was like, okay, well, now that I figured out I can do that, great. Fun fact, if you go through this level and you're almost dead, this line right here, "It's too easy, Alec," gets changed out. I love that. I love that they thought about doing something like that to kind of tailor the experience for yourself. And they quote the lines verbatim from the movie a lot, which is another thing that, like, if you love GoldenEye, the movie, much like I do, then this is just such a treat. You'll see throughout the game that there are so many little things that prove that these guys are not just fans of the GoldenEye movie, but that they are fans of Bond in general. I don't think this game was successful because it was Bond. I think it was successful for a bunch of other reasons. But the Bond license being tied to it does give it a certain specialness. And particularly within the Bond fandom, we are incredibly lucky to have a game like this within its library, especially since most of the Bond games, which I really like, I mean, we don't exactly have the caliber of like Resident Evil 4 with a lot of these Bond games, or Ocarina of Time or something like that. You know, they're mostly above average movie tie-in games or licensed video games. And this was still very much at the time where a lot of these were sneezed out like once or twice a year or so. I really think that Batman Arkham Asylum was one of the critical turning points in licensed video games that, like, we can actually put some effort into this, you know? And I think without Arkham Asylum, you don't get things like 007 First Light, which is, you know, I used to think Everything or Nothing was the most realized, fully realized version of the Bond universe. I now think it's First Light. They just put so much work into it, and it feels like their own take on this, on the property. Whereas here, we're looking to replicate the feel of the movie while just allowing you to play a fun game, which surprisingly doesn't always happen. Runway is one of those levels that I definitely think of when I play GoldenEye, but it's not always one that I go to, mostly because it's designed to be just like a good release after some of the stress of facility. And, you know, you got a tank here, which of course you didn't have before. Oh, I hate when those tank shells fall through the floor. That happens a couple of times with some of my grenades in this playthrough. It sucks. But yeah, anyways, so Runway being designed as a sort of tension releaser thing, this goes into something that I think is really hard to nail, which is just pacing within video games. It shouldn't, depending on the game, it shouldn't always be an upward ramp where you start from the very easiest, you go to the hardest, and it just works up that way. I do like that when some video games like do an ebb and flow of the thing. I don't want there to be stupidly hard difficulty spikes, and that tends to happen when you do the ebb and flow, but it does really help endear the game to me, because there will be because it'll feel like the game is actually working with you. It's not just a test that, you know, a written test that you got to pass sort of a thing. It's a game that's like, all right, you had a difficult challenge, here's a reward, here's something a little easier but still fun, and we'll move up from there. I kind of like that peak and valley take on pacing with this. All right, Siberian Plateau. One of a couple of levels where they basically use the same environment from before. They're both of these are in the Siberian wilderness. These are probably some of my least favorite to play through, like right up there with Runway and Silo or whatnot. And I'll get to my problem with Silo here in a bit. But still, this is a great example of the mentality of the game designers. They designed the levels first and then put the objectives in later, as a way to kind of encourage you to explore more parts of the map. And of course, as you play on higher difficulties, you have more objectives to go through. And I love that dynamic way of handling difficulty. It isn't just enemies hit harder, there's more of them, there's less body armor or anything like that, but like you're actually asked to spend more time in some of these levels. The layout here is exactly the same as it is on Surface 2. And so as I'm like trying to get my bearings before I go for some of the higher difficulties in the time trial on Surface 2, I'll play a lot of Surface 1 because the layout will be the same, so I'll just kind of get my bearings easily because Surface 2, of course, has the red fog, which makes it so much more difficult. And this house that I just came out of is actually a key location in both levels. And so sometimes as I'm playing through this, I keep forgetting, do I take the key from that one house and start to go over to the crop of outhouses over to the side of the dish, or do I go to this one just north of this dome? It can get a little confusing, but that's also part of the fun of it. And of course I have reward points waiting. Yeah, I don't know that I need to talk about this. I mean, I've gotten so many free games by doing that reward system. It's so nice. Actually, come to think of it, I still have a free month of Xbox Games Pass to try. I think I'm saving that for when Gears of War E-Day comes through, and then I'll do that and Halo Campaign Reimagined, or whatever that Campaign Evolved or something like that. Whatever the newest thing that came out for, which I gotta say, it's just really weird to go onto my PlayStation 5 and there's Halo there on the storefront. We live in such weird times. And you can see that clipping that I was talking about, where suddenly objects are invisible. You can see through them. Which, again, I went back onto my N64, and yeah, it's definitely there. Somehow it was less noticeable to me, or maybe I was just playing at a younger age, and I just kind of took this more as an accepted, common thing. And now that we've had more polished games since then, these sorts of things stand out to me. So one of the things that helps most with the time trial on this level is getting that grenade launcher. And if you launch it just at the right point, it will go ahead and destroy the locks for you that you need to come down here. And so it was just a combination of trial and error practicing that. And I don't always get it, but even though I'm not going for the time trial, it's a nice thing to be able to do here, so I don't just spend more time shooting at these. All right, Bunker 1. I love the development, actually, between this and Bunker 2, because this is supposed to be several years before you go into Bunker 2 and you meet Natalia for the first time. And so there are entire sections in Bunker 2 that aren't there in Bunker 1, and you can see them constructing this underground bunker. I love that so much. And I also love that they felt, okay, the bunker and Cervanaya complex from the film is just a really cool location. Can we figure out a way to let Bond go there? And I especially appreciate this with movie adaptations. I feel like a lot of movie adaptations are far more concerned about just replicating the movie as you see it, that they're not really willing to change the story all that much beyond like certain little bits. Here you change up quite a bit of the story so that you have excuses for more levels, for Bond to go to some movie locations he doesn't in the film. I think that's great. It's this kind of creativity that I really enjoy from older movie adaptation games. You see this a lot in Super Star Wars as well. if you ever play through more of that game, because, you know, it's notoriously difficult. Which I have played through that game, but I was only able to do it on the PlayStation through the save slot sort of thing. There's no way I could actually beat that legitimately. And I've had my fair share of difficulty-related achievements that I'm very proud of. One of them beating 00 Agent on here twice. If you're looking to get something new out of GoldenEye and have never looked into it before, watch the speedrunners of this game. They pull off insanely crazy things, particularly on this level. You can, on one of the difficulties, I think it's just regular agent, they've been able to beat this in like 15 or 16 seconds. It's just absolutely nuts. Yes, and this bugs me too. Whenever I forget that, oh yeah, that's right, I need a key to unlock this door, and I have to remember, okay, what is the guard that normally does that? You'll see here later that, like, I remember, oh yeah, that's right, he was the guard that was just kind of walking around a whole bunch that I killed. I think it was like my third guard that I killed on this playthrough. And I don't want to go too much further because there's a couple of guards just waiting there. I'm not looking to absolutely max out every level or anything like that. At least not this time. Bunker 2, I will be wanting to do that, and I'll get to why when we get there. I do have to wonder how Bond got out of Cervanaya, because Natalia got out with, you know, a sled dog thing, and we know Bond was parachuted into both times into Bunker and the surface. So I just kind of love to imagine Bond being on a dog sled, going out. Yeah, make that look awesome, Pierce Brosnan. You probably could. Okay. So I mentioned earlier that Silo is one of my least favorite levels to play through. The reason why it's so linear in comparison to the other levels that we're doing through here, and when you play on anything other than Agent, you have a time limit, and it's a fairly restrictive time limit. Like, if you forget an important document that you needed to pick up in one of the main hub areas, to try to go all the way back through and find that sucker, you're not going to have a lot of time to then go back and beat the level. Like, this is one of those things, you would better make sure that you've memorized what documents you need to pick up, what things you need to do in each area. Make sure on 00 Agent to plant the charges, because otherwise you're really going to be cutting it close. And you have a plethora of enemies here. Now, the nice thing about this being linear is that you can get them to single file come at you through some of the halls or whatnot, but there's not a whole lot of cover in some of these halls, and so, not surprisingly, you'll be down on health. And this is not a place with a whole lot of body armor. On one difficulty, I think it goes up to 2 body armors, and there's 2 different types of body armors in this game. One will give you 40% of armor, and one will give you 100%. I don't know if there's a visual distinction between the two of them. You just have to know which one's which. And they don't stack on top of each other, or at least I don't recall them stacking on top of each other. So even if you get a 40% armor, you know, if you go and get 100% armor, it's not going to add to it. And that's particularly a pain in jungle. One thing I really love about the Xbox version is that when you go to crouch, you don't have to do like the 2 or 3 button prompt like you did on the N64. It's just simply push the B button and you crouch down. That made this so much easier when going on the higher difficulties. And already I have guards flying towards me. And see here, I forgot that the body armor is on like the top of the missile silo, and so I just wasted a little bit of time there. One of the nice things about this level is that you just get a plethora of ammo. So I don't feel bad at all about spraying bullets all over the place. And by the way, I'm kind of a bullet sprayer in this game anyways. Pick up the DAT tape. I always forget the DAT tape on some of the other difficulties. Oh man. Most sure tactic of making sure that you don't get killed. Stand next to a door that you can just go ahead and close at a moment's notice. Yep, and there's the body armor. And I think this is a 40% body armor. We'll see when I get shot here inevitably. Interestingly, I have gotten these canisters to explode, but it's only like when I've put on the cheats and I have like highly explosive weapons. Like I've gone through here with a grenade launcher or a rocket launcher at times, and I was able to get these things to explode, but like I don't think I've actually gotten them to explode in just like a normal playthrough or anything like that. Not that I'm curious to figure that out more than I have to on some of these. I love that the camera is the camera from Moonraker and it has the 007 logo on it. This is something that I would be very curious to know. I've never heard the developers talk about how much they love Bond and what eras they are, but I'm just thinking in terms of age of the developers likely were at this time. A lot of them probably grew up with the Roger Moore films, and so you can see just as you go through this that most of the nods to classic Bond are Roger Moore, and I'll point those out when we get to them. Guy stuck through a door there. Man, that was a saving grace here. I would have had to have gone back and got that body armor. Strafing, an invaluable tool in this that I don't think many games utilize quite as well. And then these little moments when you get into like an elevator, the end of cutscene thing where he does some sort of movement that really feels like it's got Bond sass to them. I don't know. It's fun. Frigate is one of my absolute favorite levels, and I mean, there's a couple of reasons for that, but one of them is actually something that I failed to really address. You know, when I did the music shorts and I started on GoldenEye, one of the comments was, "You forgot the frigate. The frigate's so cool." That was a tough call because I initially intended to have the frigate music as one of the top 5 tracks, but like as I was listening to the soundtrack, I actually found that like I was getting pulled over to a couple of the others a little bit more, so frigate unfortunately got left off. But that, if I had to pick a 6th, this would be it. Like just when you hear it, that really hard guitar with a dun dun. Oh my gosh, we mean business. This weirdly is one of the levels that, like, when you play it on Agent, it's super, super easy. even when you play it on Secret Agent, it starts to become a bit of a pain. And it has to do with the amount of hostages you have to find and these bombs you have to defuse. Oh my gosh, I hate these freaking bombs because they can explode. And if they explode, even after you've defused them, you fail the objective. And that's surprisingly easy to have happen, particularly in the engine room. Now, on Agent difficulty, you only have to rescue 2 hostages, I think, and then it goes up to like 5, and then all of them on 00 Agent. So, just, you're about to see, as we go through here, this is the corridor you enter into when I'm doing it on Agent, because the 2 guys I can rescue are just right here. You can get that guy, and then get that guy, and then turn around and go ahead and go after the helicopter so you can place the tracking bug on it. This is another one. If you're into speed running, go watch some of the videos about how they discovered to save time here. And it's a really great lesson in random number generation and just how much of this game's speed runs are dependent on luck. You know, I used to watch a fair amount of Carl Jobs a few years back, and he had some really great videos explaining what's going on, the mechanics of this level, and why getting like 22, 23 seconds, I don't remember what the record is, why this was not something based on skill, it was based a lot on random number generation. One of them is that the hostages don't always go to the same area. They can pick one of several different locations, and once they get to that particular location, then they just disappear. But in addition to that, the hostages don't start running until the guards around them have fully dissipated. And if you've ever played this game for a fair amount of time, there's a lot of death animations, which can range from just like a couple of seconds to ones that take forever to do. I'll point it out when we get to the very end of this, when we get to the Egyptian level. When I kill Baron Samedi there, just like, he takes 4 freaking ever to die. Yeah, this room is the bane of my existence. If I'm not careful with my bullets here, they'll hit that computer console and destroy that bomb. I know for some people, the frigate level is one of their least favorites because it can be really confusing to navigate through. And I kind of agree with that, but I've also played this level a whole bunch of times that there's only a couple of areas here where I actually really get turned around. For the most part, I remember where I'm going, which end the helicopter's on, which end the boat's on, and I'm able to do that. This might be my favorite end of level thing, rivaled by Streets, just Bond doing his tie, adjusting his cufflinks. That's great. Little things like that. Yeah, and I actually unlocked a cheat with this. And so, of course, we want to go back and see what the cheat was, because I don't have these memorized which ones go to which. So no radar multiplayer. Almost a nothing cheat, but I always turn it on when we do multiplayer because, like, screen peeking is just so easy to do there that you need to make it so that the other people playing aren't given such a unfair disadvantage. So just to be fair to everybody else, I always turn off the radar so I can't just find exactly where they are. And I do my best to avoid screen peeking. That's one of the reasons I would have really liked to have had the online option with this versus the Switch, so that I could just go ahead and have an entire screen to myself for the first time in GoldenEye multiplayer. That'd be cool. And the red fog. Oh my gosh. I hate this thing so much. Like, it gives it such a cool atmosphere and makes it very distinct from Surface 1. But that being said, I find it's more frustrating when you're trying to figure out the level, because just this is such a big open level. It's so easy to get lost here. So I've put in kind of like little... So I've kind of memorized where certain key areas are, and when I see like that platform that was there, I know where I'm at in the level. And you'll see that I'm like running off to the trees here. And the way that I remember where the bunker is that I need to go into, that little outhouse, is when the trees do a big pivot like this. And I'm like, okay, it's just around the corner from there, and there it is. I've had that camera trigger the alarm on me even when I've not been in front of it, so I have a grudge against that particular camera. Oh, and the clob. This gun is so iconic because it's so stupid. Just a regular submachine gun, and it does like hardly any damage. I've done multiplayer matches where all we had was the clob, and we just spray bullets all over the place. We run out of bullets, so we have to do slappers only to kill the other person. So many great memories. As much as I would love to say that GoldenEye succeeds and holds up even to this day because of its single player, let's be honest, the big thing everybody did was the multiplayer. Shot a little too high for the camera here. You're probably aware that the GoldenEye multiplayer was added in very last minute, like within the last month or two before the game released. And it's very bare bones standard as we understand games now, but there was a fair amount of customization at this time. And you got to remember, back in 1997, multiplayer was kind of the domain of the PC, at least four-person multiplayer. Certainly other systems had a couple of multiplayer options, but they were a little limited. And particularly on Nintendo, really the only big multiplayer title you had before this that I remember anybody doing was Mario Kart, which is great, and it was nice to have four-player action versus the two-player, I think, was that was available on the SNES. I don't remember. I didn't actually own an SNES. But this was nice. It was not a Nintendo-specific property. It felt like it had a broader range. You didn't have to deal with cartoon characters if that wasn't your bag. So this was just such a staple. And this, if you actually look at the sales of GoldenEye over the years, it actually sold better on the years after its release, which isn't always the case, especially today. A lot of big games are like movies now, where their most crucial point sales-wise is within the first few months. That's where they make the majority of their sales when it's still the hot topic of discussion. No, GoldenEye succeeded partly because of the rental system that was there back in the day with Blockbuster and whatnot. But you also had just good word of mouth. Everybody was talking about this game. Everybody would have pizza parties with this, where all you had to do was just bring the game and four controllers over with somebody's N64 system, and you were off to the races. This is not my least favorite level, but this is my least favorite level to play through, if that makes sense. The problem is that GoldenEye actually does have stealth mechanics in play. Surprisingly good in, development for 1997. Here's the problem that I found just through trial and error. If I shoot more than like 3 bullets of the AK-47 and don't have like a cooldown period in between the bullet fires, I'm just going to get a whole bunch of guards coming at me in this opening area. And so you'll have to bear with me. This is going to be one of the longer levels for me to get through, because I found the safest way to take out these guys is just to have them one by one coming to me and then doing the throwing knives on them, which the throwing knives are not great. I don't think they're particularly notable in terms of how much damage they do, and of course, it's very easy to miss the person entirely or take more than 6 knives to take them down, because of course you have hit detection here, and if you don't hit them in the head, they don't always die off on the first shot. That is something that I like with the guns, that like if you shoot somebody repeatedly in the gun, they'll do these stop back motions, but they won't really take any damage. And if you shoot them in the foot or the hand or something like that, they'll have a unique animation showing that, but they'll take very minimal damage. The best way to take them out is headshots. You know, surprisingly, slappers are actually better for this, but I prefer the throwing knives just because I can go ahead and pick them back up and move around a whole lot easier. I don't have to be right next to the guards. This is particularly nice. So I'm a little bummed watching this now, because when I was playing through this, just in the chaos of the throwing knives, I could not remember where I threw the last knife, and it's actually back over towards Natalia, but I didn't want to really go all the way back there. So for the rest of this, I'm just going to be having the 5 knives versus the 6, and it just really bugged me playing through this. Really, I find the most sure way of getting through this without getting swarmed is just for this opening area. Lure as many guards as you can, one by one, back to one of the door areas. You know, once I get past a certain set of doors, then I'll just go ahead and start shooting a whole bunch. I'll still have guards coming at me, but I've taken care of a lot of them. And it really does feel like infinite guards. I'm pretty sure it is. It's not limited to whatever guards are in the building or anything like that. And that's particularly tough here because the body armor is behind a series of locked doors that you have to get a particular key to get to, and it's one of those roaming guards that comes through. Yep, and I knew there was going to be another guy. Once I get past those 2 doors down the hall, that's when I feel a little freer to go ahead and start using the guns, because by that point I've taken out a decent chunk of the guards, maybe like a third of them in these opening areas. I think one of the crueler things about having stealth on this level is you do have a pair of silenced PP7s that you can get, but it requires 2 safe keys to get, and one of them is through those double doors that I talked about earlier. So, like, I'm already a good chunk of the way through the level before I can even have the PP7s and go ahead and start blasting away. So you're only seeing my final playthrough of this level. I actually failed this level about 3 or 4 times before the one that you're seeing now. And of course I just cut that out because this thing is already going to be 2 hours long. That key card's going to be nice for getting through some of these doors. Yeah, at this point, I'm pretty sure I've gotten just about everybody that I need to before I open up these doors. And from here on out, yep. I still try to keep my fire limited to 3 or 4 bullets on a person. this weapon. So it's supposed to be, you know, an AK-47, right? But for various patent laws and whatnot, they couldn't actually use the names of the guns as they actually are. So as a kid, not knowing what an AK-47 was, I always called this the pencil gun. So somehow killing guards in range of a camera is not that much of a problem. It's just when you get on camera, that's when it's the problem. And then at this point, I just feel like I've killed enough of the guards. I'm just going to go ahead and start spraying bullets all over the place. Because it's in this area, it's the last document I need. It's like the red folder or something. Yeah, that thing. And, you know, the body armor's right there. So I can finally feel a little more confident. And by this time, I've destroyed all but one of the required cameras. There are actually a couple of fixed gun emplacements with the cameras in another part of the base, but you don't need to go take those out, so I just don't. Now, I could go ahead and bring out Natalia and bring her with me, but as many people know playing through this game, if you can avoid having Natalia just walk around, do it. So I will go through the point of... Actually, there are 2 more cameras left here. So I will go through this entire thing, make sure absolutely everybody's taken out that I care to have taken out, and then I'll go ahead and bring Natalia out of her prison. It just makes it so easy. The jungle level was another one where I just kept failing like towards the end because Natalia kept getting in my way when I was trying to take certain guards out from a distance. And so I played through that one about 3 or 4 times before the final playthrough, which you'll see later. Seriously, look at the attention to detail in this place. You know, they have the weird eye emplacement on the wall, which in the movie is where the keys, where you can get the keys to the GoldenEye. They have the crosshair TVs just hanging down from the ceiling. It's so great. Okay, now that I've taken care of all the cameras, all the guards I care about, there's a couple of more back in that corridor with the fixed gun emplacements, but I do not have a death wish at the moment. And by this point, I had played through the level, like I said, about 4 or 5 times. I was just so ready to be done with this. So you don't actually need Natalia to go up to that computer and say her lines. If you have the key card to get out of the building, you can just go ahead and get out of there and end the level. I think this level's time trial is on agent difficulty. The way that you can tell before you've even done it. So, Dam, you have Secret Agent. And then the next level, Facility, it's 00 Agent. And on the next level, Runway, it's Agent. And then it cycles back through that. So, Surface 1 is Secret Agent. Bunker 1 is 00 Agent. And so on. Runway would be the first cheat, I imagine, just about every one of us locked, and it unlocked Big Head mode, you know, DK mode, which was such a fun nod, because at the time Rare was developing the Donkey Kong games. And it's a little unfortunate when they did the Rare replay because they just didn't have the rights or couldn't negotiate the rights to put some of their most popular games here. I mean, if you're going to do a celebration of Rare as a company and you don't have Donkey Kong Country or GoldenEye as part of your package, you're really lacking. Rare Replay is a great package, by the way. If you've never played Banjo-Kazooie or Perfect Dark, this is the perfect way to do that. Yes, the word choice was intentional there. Statue on Secret Agent. You would imagine the 00 agents would always be the hardest ones to unlock in terms of the time trials, and I mean, they can be, and a lot of them are, but Secret Agent on this has been consistently described as one of the hardest ones to do, because you have to do this in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. Well, given that you have to go all the way to the end of the level and then go back to the beginning of the level and then go back to this opening area before coming back out, and you have 2 different conversations where you have to get to a certain point before you can move, that's not a lot of time. So I found the best way to do that is just to keep to the left area here, and to this left pathway, you know, just kind of hug the wall and just run through that way. That's the easiest way I have found not to get confused where absolutely everything is. And as long as you just remember where the Lenin statue is that you need to find in order to meet up with Trevelyan, where that is in position to Zukovsky, I find navigating this level is not as difficult as I've heard some people complain it to be. Again, maybe that's unfair, because I've been playing this game pretty much since the late 90s. I first owned an NES, and so Super Mario Brothers and Bugs Bunny's Crazy Castle was kind of my first real video game experiences. My cousins who lived next door had the N64, and I definitely remember this being a big staple. And so, you know, going over to their house, I would play it quite a bit there. And then a few years later, after we moved, we got our own N64, and this was one of the first games that we got. This was long before I was ever into James Bond. And I've said this before in another video. That's the reason why my logo at the beginning of most of these is styled after the GoldenEye N64 opening, because it's a nod, and it gets me in the right frame of mind as I do these videos, that this was my first introduction to or exposure to anything James Bond. It was not what made me become a Bond fan, but this planted the seed. And as I was only aware of this game at first, I learned pretty quickly that it was based off of a movie, and I knew the bonus levels were taking elements from some other movies. I didn't realize how many Bond films even then that there were. So I kind of thought it was a 2 or 3 movie series, not realizing that they had 18 movies by the time this came out, because Tomorrow Never Dies came out around the same time as this did. So once the objective is complete here, if you're going for the time trial, this is when you start booking it. Don't even pay attention to these shotgun guys. Just leg it. In case you hadn't heard through any of the other videos, what made me a James Bond fan was, I actually know almost to the day when it was. It was the 4th of July weekend in 2004. We were living in Washington State at the time, and my family decided to take a 4th of July trip up to Vancouver, Canada, BC. And at the time, they had a traveling exhibit for Bond, James Bond the Exhibition. And, you know, you had like a little secret agent card that was mostly black. And we were looking for something to do. And so my dad took me and my older brother to the Bond exhibit, despite the fact that we weren't Bond fans at the time. We just thought that that was kind of a cool idea. And so I saw all these costumes and props from the films that meant almost nothing to me, but I was fascinated by these. And so after that trip, I then went home and used some of my money that I was getting for doing mowing the lawn. That was my most lucrative way of earning cash. You know, it was like $10 every time I mowed the lawn. So I took my money and I went to the local Fred Meyer there, kind of a Kroger store here in the U.S. I went to the Fred Meyer, went to the entertainment section, and looked for any Bond movies I could find. And unfortunately, at the time, 2004, the special edition DVDs were kind of out of print by that point, or they weren't regularly available in every store. So the only movie I could find was Die Another Day. That's why it ended up being my first movie. And I remembered seeing movie trailers for it a couple of years prior. And, you know, I thought this made somewhat of sense. I knew with the little bit of research I could do that Die Another Day was the most recent Bond film at the time. And it starred Pierce Brosnan, which was the only Bond I had any real experience with. So I thought this would be a safe way to get into the franchise. And then I had a kind of a mixed reaction. I mostly enjoyed the movie, but towards the end I was like, this is really not great, is it? When Bond and Graves are fighting on the airplane. But I was pretty confident. I was like, well, there were 19 other Bond films, plus apparently a couple of unofficial ones I had never heard of before. So, like, you know, maybe this is just one that didn't stick with me. I'll go ahead and try some of the others. I was really grateful for Blockbuster in my local library so that I could rent these movies and find them out. We had a DVR by that point, so whenever the Bond movies came on cable, I was able to record them, and that's how I watched some of the Connery ones for the first time. I know Dr. No, the very first time I saw it was through a DVR program. Yeah, see there, 3 minutes, 15 seconds. Holy crap. Like with Bunker 2 and like with Jungle, Archives took me a few times to do, so you're just going to see this one playthrough of it. My goodness, this was a real pain. And the reason was not because of Natalia, because I knew better than to find Natalia. I know exactly where she is. The problem is that there are stealth mechanics actually in place here. I found that out through trial and error, that just in this opening area, if you can kill a few guards so that you can start to make your way out of this lower floor, you'll be in a much better position. And thankfully, there's a set of body armor through that other door. Just go ahead and take out this guy if I can. And there you go. There's the body armor. So if I can just kill these first 4 or 5 guards without triggering some of the other ones, that surprisingly helps, because this is another one where they just love to throw guards at you a whole bunch. The reason I kept failing was not because I was dying or anything like that. I'm going to come dangerously close to running out of ammo here because there's a bunch of guards that just come in right there. No. What happens is every so often when you're talking to Mishkin in order to get the flight box, you can have these guys come in after you. And some of them will have grenades, which, oh my gosh, they can shoot you a whole bunch of times and Mishkin will still do his dialogue. But as soon as you start shooting back at them, yeah, then you can't complete the mission because he has to give you the key. He doesn't drop it and let you pick it up after he dies, which is such a pain. And I tried on one playthrough taking these guys out with a bunch of slappers when they started showing up behind Mishkin. That didn't really work. Mishkin got killed in the crossfire very quickly. This to me is in my top 4 of hardest time trials to do, because this one is on 00 Agent and you have to do the thing in like a minute 20 or something like that, something like really, really tight. And because you have to get to a certain point in this conversation, it's almost to the end of the conversation before he gives you the key, you don't have a lot of time. And so this is one of the only times where I found that it actually is better for you to grab Natalia first and just make a beeline for this guy. Because one of the two ways you can get out of this building is pretty close to where he is right now. And so that's how I was able to do it. But it was a lot of trial and error, too. Seriously, I put myself through pain to get 100% on this game when it came out back in January of 23. This re-release, I mean. One of the downsides, though, is because I'm doing this on an Xbox, doing the strafing method of movement is not as easy to pull off here. And so it's actually easier if you're going for the time trials to do it on the N64 because you have a dedicated button for the strafe run. And as long as you plan your routes out, within a couple of seconds you get up to full speed when you do that strafe, and you can get through some of these levels pretty easily. That helps with this next level, Streets, which I think the time trial is on Agent, and you'd have to get through it in like less than a couple of minutes. It's actually faster to do that level, I found, strafe running through the thing. You know, get the right body armor and just plow your way through. The tank is more fun, but I ended up always getting the time with more leeway by avoiding the tank. I love the insinuation that Russians just leave the keys for the tank in the ignition. I mean, how else was Bond supposed to get into that tank? I don't know if you can hotwire tanks as easily as you can cars. The funny thing is, if you want to, you can actually get to the end of the level inside of the 3-minute time limit on the higher difficulties, but because contacting Valentine is a requirement on Secret Agent and 00 Agent, you actually have to go out of your way to get more time. I love that they even thought about putting Valentine here because, of course, in the movie, he just appears for the one segment with the nightclub and then in his office, and that's the last you see of him. But having him show up here a couple of times is really cool because, of course, they didn't put in a level with the nightclub, which is fine. What I'm about to do here is one of the most well-hidden secrets I find in the game because just why would you think that you could just go through the windows? And you get some grenade rounds here for if you manage to get a grenade launcher, but there's also a full set of body armor here. Thankfully, Streets is rather generous with the body armor. There's 2 or 3 full ones throughout, and then, of course, when you're in the tank, it acts as an extra layer of armor, so if they shoot you, you notice that your damage doesn't go down quite as much as when you're just on foot. I'm glad that they're acknowledging that Valentine's not doing this out of the goodness of his heart because he and Bond are just good friends. Because, of course, in the movie, they're enemies with a common cause. Though, of course, in The World's Not Enough, he's just like, oh, Bond, what a great guy. Why am I suddenly worried I'm not carrying enough insurance? But, you know, whatever. This is one of the most memorable parts of the campaign, getting to recreate some of the bits with the streets action, which is... I said it very recently when I did the favorite things ranking. Yeah, that is my favorite scene of GoldenEye. I did try sincerely to look at some of the other talking scenes, and the one that came the closest was the beach scene with Bond and Natalia, where she calls him out for being so cold in taking out Trevelyan. I don't know what it is, but the sound of these rocket launchers that are going to show up in a minute terrify me. Like, the second I hear that first, I start running for cover. Man, these guys are just so quick with the explosives on this thing. Now, granted, you have far more damage that you can tank, pun intended, when you're actually in the tank. But I think this is the only level that I can recall that actually has, planted mines there that you can roll over. And, of course, you have to be worried about the civilians. The sound design in this game is just excellent. And I'm not even just talking about the music, which I've managed to not talk about up to this point, but just the sound design itself is excellent. Because I've played this game so many times, I know more or less what gun is being shot just when I hear it. And then I just decide, you know what, screw it. I'm so close to the end of the level, I'm just going to go ahead and finish this with as little health as possible, I guess. And gotta be careful, because some civilian just decided to show up. And what I hate is that the civilians sometimes double back, and so they can get caught in an explosion or just be run over by the tank. It's a real problem. I said before that Frigate may be my favorite level ending bit. This is the only one that rivals it. It's so funny. I don't hear a lot of people talking about the depot as one of their favorite levels, and I kind of understand why. But it is one I've spent a fair amount of time just kind of going through because, of course, you need to know which warehouses to stop at to find the computer network or find the ammo dump or whatnot. Again, 25 years of experience with this game, I know where those are. So this is not a problem to me. And this is another one where it's pretty tight. You're on Secret Agent this time for the time trial, and you only have something like a little over 2 minutes to be able to do this. Getting to the train is not the problem. On Secret Agent, you have to destroy their computer mainframe and pick up a safe key so that you can get the blueprints for the helicopter. And it's the fixed gun emplacement that's the real pain in the butt. Sometimes I've been able to destroy it with the submachine gun. I actually find that just it's much easier to work with the PP7. You just need to know where to do your strafe out to be able to get this thing. But because it does not take more than like a second or two to start targeting you, you've got such a small window of opportunity. And, you know, the most effective way in my mind is just unload your frickin' clip on the thing. Thankfully, this is another level that has a lot of guards coming in, so it's not too hard to spray your bullets and still have a lot more to go through. Actually, as it turns out, when I switch to my PP7 here, it just needs one shot, and then I'm done. These fixed gun emplacements, oh my gosh. Particularly at the beginning of the control center. Yeah, those things are a freaking pain. Weirdly, they won't open up the door. So I'm not worried about people coming in behind me like I am with a couple of the other levels. Yep, and there we go. So now beating the level to me should be a cinch, but I actually lost a fair amount of health getting to here, and I don't recall this level being replete with body armor, and so my tactic here was to just go ahead and take out a few guards and leg it to the train. So one thing that you may notice as we've been playing through the game is the color palette. There's a fair amount of color to it, but there's a lot of whites and grays and blacks. I remember a developer interview talking about that this was their way of helping the performance of the game. I'm not entirely sure how exactly that translates, but I guess maybe whites and grays and blacks are easier to conjure up than a whole bunch of color. But it's also a way to like hide details or whatnot that, you know, you don't have to, because this wasn't the days of intricate 3D modeling where you could actually see raised particles or anything like that across like every micro inch of the door or whatnot. But it does weirdly fit this game. It weirdly fits this universe, particularly because Bond likes to wear a lot of darker colors on top of white. Alrighty, now it's the train. This is another one. I mean, I feel like I've been saying this quite a few times of certain levels being iconic. This is absolutely an iconic one. And like Silo, you know, being so linear, which is kind of contrary to how a lot of the rest of the game was put together, it does make it so that there's not really a whole lot of strategy here. Particularly going on the higher difficulties, I just kind of found that I had to memorize every single guard. Thankfully, this is not an infinite guard spawning level. That would have made this go over really well. No, instead, it is 4 guards in this first car, and they stay in exactly the same area, and so, like, you use the boxes as much as you can as cover, unlike what I just did there, destroying it. Do what I say, not what I do. The frustrating thing is because, you know, the game's auto-aiming works fairly well, but it tends to center on the person's chest, and depending on where you're at, that means a lot of your bullets go into the gun, and so you can just waste clips on one guy because it just keeps hitting his gun. So as we're going through this, I thought I'd share a little bit of the history of GoldenEye. It was originally intended to be on the Super Nintendo system. Basically, Rare's Martin Hollis kind of talked about this, and he served as the director for the game. They originally suggested a 2D platformer for the Super Nintendo, kind of like Donkey Kong Country. So, you know, think 1994, 1995. And there's precedent for this in James Bond. I mean, the Duel that was done before is something of a platformer. However, Hollis proposed kind of a 3D shooting, although the idea was, I think, to do it more of as a light gun shooter like Virtua Cop. So it'd be mostly on rails and whatnot. So that would have been a decent idea. The thing is that it was still very much a kind of a conceptual development going on here, because they didn't exactly know what the N64 was going to be like. And a lot of developers had to deal with these kinds of limitations. I mean, rather infamously, Shadows of the Empire for the N64, which served as a launch title in some territories, they had to use a modified SNES controller just to get a feel for how the game moves. And, I mean, as much as I have a fondness for Shadows of the Empire, it is not one of the better controlling games. Still, the concept of varied objectives within each missions was kind of inspired by plenty of other games, particularly Mario 64, where, you know, you go in, you have like 6 or 7 different stars to collect, and in order to do that, you had to go to like a particular area of the level, you had to collect 100 coins or something like that. And so it was inspired by that, but I was surprised to learn that because it feels like such a natural idea for a James Bond game. As part of this conception, there were going to be on-rails sections in addition to the free roaming. And the facility is kind of an idea of how this would have looked. You know, that level, you can easily imagine playing through that as an on-rails segment. So the initial priority, kind of as I indicated earlier, was to create the spaces and then come up with the objectives later. So it was the placements at the start and exit points, kind of some balance considerations, characters that we were going to put in here, how many guards or whatnot, and then they would come up with the actual story within the level, what you were supposed to be doing. And this gave the thing such kind of a non-linear feel, which almost feels a little contrary to a lot of first-person shooters. You know, Halo, released 4 years later, it has some open spaces too, but it's still fairly linear, and I feel they certainly were looking at GoldenEye as an idea of like, all right, how do we design these spaces or whatnot? Normally what I like to do for this particular area is position myself in a space so I can get Ormoff and Xenia, which is an essential thing to do on 00 Agent because you do not have enough time for Natalia to crack Boris's code. And so if you manage to shoot Xenia, you're given like an extra 20 or 30 seconds or something like that. Just enough time to be able to do this. By the way, I love that they kept the laser watch in and allowed you to go through the floor, just like in the film. So the developers were given kind of a broad license for James Bond as a property, and so that's why a lot of the multiplayer mode features characters and locations inspired by some of the different movies. I think it'd be kind of a funny thing now to talk about the score. Again, I'm surprised I've gotten almost an hour and a half into this thing, and I'm only just now talking about the score, because this level, rather notably, doesn't have score except for one section. It's just the jungle sounds, which gives this such an atmosphere that I love. You feel so deep in the jungle that you're really infiltrating enemy territory here. And a lot of these guards have body armor on top of their heads. I love that, by the way, that instead of placing an extra layer of armor over them, it was instead just placed on their heads. But anyway, so the score was done primarily by Graham Norgate and Grant Kirkhope. Norgate had worked with Rare before, doing Blast Corp, and Kirkhope had been involved in Donkey Kong Land 2, I think. And there was actually a third composer that's not often talked about, Robert Beanland, who did the elevator music. So Norgate took care of the sound effects, so maybe it is appropriate that I'm bringing him up now for the jungle, because he was primarily responsible for a lot of what I like about the sound design here. And there was a lot of effort being put into making things sound distinct or whatnot. So one of the cheats that you can unlock is paintball mode, and I love having paintball mode on just for fun. But my friend's mom, both he and I were raised in a very in conservative households. His friend's mom insisted that if we were going to play this, we had to play it with the paintball mode because she didn't want to see blood or bullet holes anywhere, and because like somehow that makes the game less violent. Yeah, I'm not sure that I understand that logic either, but then again, I don't understand a lot of ultra conservative positions, but that's neither here nor there. But I do remember this game got a bit of attention for its content. I know it was banned in a couple of countries, or at least heavily censored for a time. And even here in the States, I know that just before release, it got rated T for teen, but there was a bit of a debate surrounding this game and its sensibilities for kids or whatnot, because this is Nintendo, and Nintendo only makes kid-friendly games, right? Yeah, well, Perfect Dark becomes an M-rated game, and but whatever. Okay, despite the fact that this level was one of the ones where I failed it about 3 or 4 times because Natalia kept going in front of my assault rifle, I am so glad she is made to be useful, at least for the first part of this level, where she's got the Magnum. And if you position yourself correctly, because they're almost always going to go after you versus Natalia, she can take out quite a number of people. And in one of my playthroughs, Natalia is the one that actually delivers the final blow and kills Xenia. Yeah, the easiest way to take her down and fast is to make sure you shoot her in the head. Despite the limited draw distance, it's not too hard to figure out exactly where the fixed gun emplacements are that you have to destroy. There's a little bit of trial and error. I think the toughest one to figure out is in this cave, because, literally if I go another step or two, the gun triggers. But this last part is by far one of the most frustrating sections of the game for me, because, man, these guards love to whip out grenades. And of course, one of your objectives is to protect Natalia. So some of the time, she doesn't die because she gets in my way. She dies because I failed to stop a guard from pulling the pin on the grenade. I rarely can ever actually get this just right, but I have before managed to get almost all the ammo dump and at least one of the fixed gun emplacements. And if I can get this first one, then I'll just go up the ladder and go get the other one. And literally, you'll see it at the end of this playthrough. I run through as soon as I finish the last objective, just shooting as many people as I can on my way to the elevator, because I just do not want to spend time here in case Natalia comes around the corner and gets in my way. So yeah, as much as I praise this for replicating a lot of the look and feel and to a certain extent the story of the movie very well, this game succeeds a lot more for its level design, for breaking the mold of being one of the first viable first-person shooters on consoles. And so it tends to be a great game not because of Bond, but because of everything surrounding it. That doesn't mean that the Bond license goes to waste here exactly, but it's not so inseparable that you can't imagine a game with this and you give it the skin of another action series. Like, imagine if this was The Rock. You'd probably come up with a pretty great game, and I would pay real good money to see how Sean Connery's face, the age face, translates to these character models. Which, of course, is as good as any time to mention the all Bonds mode that they wanted to have here and then weren't able to do so. But yeah, this game succeeds primarily for being a good game first and a James Bond game second, which is the reason why I don't place this above Everything or Nothing as the best Bond video game. Gameplay-wise, oh yeah, I would rather play this all day long. But Everything or Nothing does a much better job at capturing the feel of the Bond films that I would like to be playing. And First Light does a really great job at being its own thing, still playing fair with the rules of Bond, but it's the most realized version of a Bond experience that we've ever had. So that's why those are in my top three, and Everything or Nothing just happens to take the top spot. I would be interested to see if it remains that way after 3 full playthroughs of First Light. Because Everything or Nothing does have a lot of jankiness to it. There's a couple of uninspired levels there. And for my money, the difficulty curve, the difficulty is far too great for that game. I have 100%ed most of the Bond games I've owned. Everything or Nothing is a big exception. Just, I get to the last few levels and I keep getting creamed and I can't do it. Yeah, the fixed gun emplacements here. Yeah, I easily spend 2 or 3 of my first few minutes playing this level just trying to get through this opening area. And given that there is indeed a time trial on this particular level, I think it is for Secret Agent. Yeah, no, there's no way that I'm hitting it. I think it's something like 10 minutes, which is perfectly doable. But I find the main thing I have to get right is to get through this opening area as fast as possible, and then I'll have quite a bit of time to be able to do my other objectives. I'm sorry, these rudimentary animations I love. You know, she types with just the one hand the entire time, even when you're on a time crunch, and she's got the Magnum in it, and she scratches her head using the Magnum. It's just really funny to me. In the past, I've criticized this score for being a lot of remixes on the James Bond theme. And while I still agree with that it's a little bit of a downer when you realize how much Bond theme they use through here and how much of that is the substance of the score, I think I'm just being a little too harsh on it. It is a fantastic score. I listen to it constantly. And just because I wish there was more going on here than a lot of the Bond theme, when you actually listen to the score, it's a little less often than I remember it being, and even still, just the instrumentation, the tempo that a lot of these things come up with, and then just the creative ways they're able to use the Bond theme means that I probably should retire that criticism. It really doesn't mean much of anything, and I don't even know how much I truly believe that's a detriment to the score anymore. It does highlight something I do consistently say, which is that the James Bond theme is one of the most malleable and flexible movie themes ever done. I have heard it done in so many different styles with so many different kinds of tempo that I never really get tired of it. Okay, so I'm not actually going to show it here, but I do want to mention. So Boris pops up a couple of times in this game, and what's interesting to me is that he's not allowed to die here, though after you complete the objective in Bunker 1 when he shows up and he gets into the mainframe for you, you can kill him there, I think, and still complete that level. But if you kill him here, Natalia says to you, hey, I saw what you did on the camera. That wasn't very nice. And then she runs off, and you can't even beat the level anymore. And I know Calvin Dyson talked about that as being like a nice character moment. To me, it's baffling because in the film, she goes and decks him when she sees him in this control center. I don't think she would particularly care about him living or not. So it feels odd. For a game that so wonderfully replicates the film in many ways, that's a thing that I'm just kind of scratching my head a little bit. And it's not like Bond doesn't kill innocent civilians from time to time. I mean, he doesn't go out of his way to do it, certainly, but he has a license to kill. I mean, if he decides in the moment that killing an unarmed civilian would be fine, then, you know, I don't think he's going to get a whole lot of pushback from the government as long as he's able to justify it, you know, unlike the Malacca thing at the beginning of Casino Royale. But I think in this case it would be even more justified because without Boris, Trevelyan can't complete his plan. So yeah, you do have enough mines to be able to do this trick, and I just missed it. And I was hoping to destroy one of the fixed gun emplacements, but obviously I screwed that up. But that's okay. I'll have more than enough mines because I think there's only one more mainframe left for me to destroy. I don't know how you would have been able to do it. I think you would have had to have tweaked a few things. But I kind of would have loved to have seen this be a multiplayer level. Now, for years, I stayed down here on the ground floor to take out all the guards coming through, and I could probably do that okay now. But, oh my gosh, thank you, Grazlu, for showing me a better path. So, yeah. And I even said this in my review of the game, you know, stand up here. It's so much better. The reason is because there are two types of guards. Ones with hats and ones without hats. The ones without hats will always come from the third floor, and those are the ones going after Natalia. Everybody else comes from a variety of locations, but they're always gunning after you. So as long as you prioritize taking out the guys without the hats up here, you will never have to worry about Natalia getting shot while you're completing this. And then, of course, it doesn't... You just have piles and piles of ammo just waiting for you for the couple of times you need to get more bullets, and they're just all going to be right there. Seriously, this trick makes the level essentially a piece of cake for me. Except when I almost miss getting these guys. that comment. Could you be a little quieter? I can't hear myself think. That's just rage baiting at this point. I'm like, hey, you know, screw you. I'm trying to save your life here. You know, Natalia, this would go a lot faster if you would just type with both hands. And people wonder why protecting NPC characters or escort missions just ticks us gamers off. But thankfully, this is the last we'll see of Natalia until the finale of the game. So I usually sit here, wait for a little bit until I feel like she's had enough time to get past the one door or so, and then, you know, go ahead and take out the last mainframe I need to and go ahead and beat the level. Yep, and objective A complete, so let's go on. Detonate in air. There we go. Now I just need to run to the elevator, and thankfully there is another full thing of body armor just waiting behind the lockers here. So yeah, you can easily see where I can shave off more time if I had wanted to try to get the cheat code here. So I don't actually agree that this is one of the harder ones to do. And again, that's because I know exactly what I need to do to make this easier on myself. So throughout the game, you occasionally get this minimize civilian casualties or whatnot. Here in the caverns, oh my gosh, this is probably the one I have the hardest time with, because remember what I was talking about with streets, that like sometimes these guys double back and get into your explosions. This is particularly problematic with this level. And this is going to be a long level to me. On Agent, it's simple. You just need to go all the way to the end. And so I have beaten this level in about two and a half minutes or so. But on the higher difficulties, because you need to stop and destroy all the pump controls, it just takes a lot longer. At least for me, because these are very powerful guards. And so you just need to make sure you have a fast hitting weapon, or be reasonably assured you can do a lot of headshots here. I also love these doors that they have on this level. I don't really recall them being a thing on anything else other than like a couple of multiplayer maps maybe, but just the way that they open from all sides in a kind of a spiral way, just so friggin' cool. And of course, this is an entirely new location. We don't ever really see the underbelly of the cradle in the film. And this just makes me long for a rare developed sequel to this. You know, I would really love for them to have tackled Tomorrow Never Dies, which is a very action-heavy movie, and I think would fit perfectly into this mold. Now, yeah, we did get the third-person shooting game of Tomorrow Never Dies from Black Ops Entertainment. Not the same thing. As far as I understand it, Rare both wanted to make a sequel with Tomorrow Never Dies, but was also felt a little sick of James Bond after like 2 or 3 years. And I mean, I can understand that. There's a reason I do a lot of non-Bond projects. It keeps my enthusiasm up for these things. But EA bought out the license and then decided to do their own games. And that was a bit of a mixed bag for me because I would have loved to have seen more Rare developed games based on the property. The World Is Not Enough for the N64 is probably the closest in DNA to this game, and in some cases it does things better. For me, I have never subscribed to the idea that it's a better game than this is. No, not even kind of. It does replicate a lot of the fun, certainly, but it feels like a slower, clunkier version of this game, and I don't know, its level design isn't quite as tight to me. And plus, it has a couple of levels I just absolutely hate to run through. So it doesn't have the appeal that this game does for me. And I like The World's Not Enough movie a lot, so it's not a problem that I prefer GoldenEye over Twine. Makes never mind to me. No, with this game, even the levels that I think are the weaker ones, I will still happily play through. I don't really think there's a true dud of a level where I'm just like, oh, this is such a bad level or anything like that. Whenever I have mines, use them to try to destroy a good chunk of people. I'll show it here a little later in just a minute, but all of these wooden boxes have additional ammo for you. So if you're running low or whatnot, you know, feel free to use the mines to destroy some of these in order to get some ammo. And this is one of about 3 or 4 places that I can think of where these boxes show up in this level, and so it's worth it to stop and break them open if you need the ammo. Now, fair warning, I'm going to do a fair amount of backtracking here. Just kind of combing through, make sure I've taken care of just about everybody. Yeah. And that is a bit of a holdover from trying to beat this level on 00 Agent. Man, this took forever. Because unfortunately, on 00 Agent, I think they take all of the body armor out. So you just have to make it through an 8 to 10 minute long gauntlet of bad guys. Gotta love the headshot. And then I miss it. Some of these animations are just terrific. So anyways, the reason I decided to do it this way, you know, get the gameplay footage first and then do the recording a little later, is because just the nature of being at home. Most of my good mics are at the studio, so I'd rather use those. And when I'm at home doing live streams, if anybody's ever watched me do that, my dog will show up every so often. And when she decides that she wants attention, she will not shut up. So I just kind of figured that, recording the footage on this won't be too difficult because I have a couple of different ways of doing that. But doing the voiceover, having to rely on a wireless headset that my wife uses for her job, yeah, no, I'd rather go here and use my nice microphone. Plus, I find that when I'm playing a game and I'm talking over it with somebody else, it's even more spaced out, my comments, because, of course, I'm trying to divert my attention between two different things. Being able to do it here in the studio, I can actually keep more of a running commentary going on. But, hey, if you don't like my commentary for this thing, fair enough. I don't particularly love hearing my voice either. I'm just the easiest voice actor I know to work with. There are plenty of other, plenty of other channels that do no commentary run-throughs of this game. And then I throw the mine here a little too far forward, so it does almost nothing. Oh, this guy. Yeah, so here I start playing a little more cautiously because I'm pretty low on health. I was really worried on this playthrough that, I was going to die here and have to replay the last 7 or 8 minutes. Oh, it was a nail-biter. Of course, behind those lockers is a short path that can take you to another big ammo dump, which I'm not exactly hurting for ammo here, so I just didn't bother. I mentioned I was doing the Xbox version for a couple of reasons, one of which is because I find the quality of footage would be a little higher than if I tried to run it off of the N64. And the other reason is because while I have a copy of this game for the N64, some of my games are back with my parents, who still live up in Washington State. So, yeah, I'll just make do here. If I do any more of these, they are most likely going to be the original footage through the consoles. And with the Xbox Series, there are several different ways of streaming. There's capturing clips and then stitching them together, which is more or less what I did for the review. And for every time a GoldenEye clip comes up, it comes from the first playthrough that I did for this channel. So, you're watching me play through this game again 2 years after recording those events. So I'm a tad better than before. But I found the trick here with these scientists. If you notice down on the bottom right where the ammo is, there's different images for the bullets. And you want to make sure you get the 9mm bullets, the smaller ones, because those won't go through objects and people. And I find that, when I'm shooting with the AR rifle, it'll just go right through these guys and hit this huge, unnecessary oil barrel storage that they have right here. And on 00 Agent, I don't even think you can let more than like one scientist die. So because there's like 2 back there, if you hit the oil drums, that's it. You're done. Yeah, so I shot through that window earlier to try to get some guards to come out to me. And if you hit them just right, you can actually get both of them. And one of them will be the guy that has the key card that you need. I never can remember which key card goes to which door. So I just make sure I grab all 3, just in case. And something else that's been a gotcha moment, too, for me, if you're not careful, you'll have a couple of guards come in behind you here as you get through this long hallway with the fixed gun emplacements. So I make sure to close all the doors behind me as possible, so that buys me extra time to leg it to the elevator. And you can see that the auto aim still works really, really well to help me get through this last section. I haven't spoken much of Perfect Dark, this game's spiritual sequel. That tells a very fleshed out story with an original scenario. If you've never played it before, I highly recommend checking it out. It's the same sort of gunplay as what you had before. It still has the same idea where you have multiple difficulties with different objectives and whatnot. But it really pulled a bait and switch on me because I thought it was just going to be female James Bond, a little bit more covert even than Bond tends to be. No, there's aliens in it. And so I was quite surprised with that. And I think it's one of only like 2 or 3 games on the N64 that requires an expansion pack in order to play. It was released right towards the end of the console's life. So, 2000 came out the same time as like Banjo-Kazooie, or Banjo-Tooie, excuse me. Banjo-Tooie and Majora's Mask, which really made use of that expansion pack. Oh, these infinite guards. Thankfully, this level has like 3 or 4 different places where they have full body armor for you, so at least they're being nice. And I was really worried I was going to run out of bullets right here. The areas are at the end of each of the cradle arms, and then in the little bunker on the opposite side of this one, just on the other side of the cradle over back there, that's where the other body armor is, and I'm going to grab that on my way through. So yeah, that's another Graslu trick, is that if you just sit there at the top of the ramp, Trevelyan will just keep firing at you. But if you go over to the side of the fence and just look down or whatnot, he can't shoot you, or he won't shoot you, so you can get a couple of good free shots in there. Yeah, see, there's the body armor. Oh, and I love when this music comes up. Cards on the table. This level contains my favorite music of the entire game. I get pumped every time that cradle music starts, and then when it goes into this fast-paced version that includes the Bond theme, it really feels like, yeah, this is the final showdown. And it can be a tough one if you're not careful. In fact, I almost die here trying to pull off a trick that I taught myself, which is, trying to crouch down and get out from behind the ladder. And if you're quick enough, you can actually get Trevelyan before he turns around and gets you. But of course, as soon as he starts turning the AR gun on you, yeah, you're kind of toast. If you want something funny, play this game with either the slow or fast animation cheat on, and then watch that last cutscene where Natalia comes to pick up Bond. If you have the slow animation, Bond's still running and the helicopter already takes off. Or the fast animation is probably my favorite, where Bond quickly jumps for the helicopter and then flies off, and you'll see like a second later the helicopter jostle. It's great fun. Oh yeah, the world's longest makeout session that doesn't lead to sex, because of course this is a rated T game. Or at least T here in the States. Now we still have a little bit of time left on here, and yes, I am going to be doing the additional 2 levels. However, I decided to do the Aztec one with a couple of the cheats on, just for fun. And then I do the Egyptian one legitimately. As despite the fact that it's the final level, as long as you know how to actually get to the golden gun, I don't find it to be very difficult at all. I think Aztec on 00 Agent is the single hardest level of the entire game. And just those Moonraker lasers. Seriously, though? It just, So this is basically what's happening at the end of every James Bond film for me, just in my head, is they're making out just like this the entire time. So in addition to this game surviving this long, because I think it genuinely has some great level design, great shooting mechanics and whatnot, and it's just fun to pick up and play, the other big thing is the multiplayer. There's no way around it. So much fun. So many different modes and maps that you can try, allegiances that you would do, tactics that you would do to either be fair or unfair to everybody else. But I do think if you're going to settle a dispute within the Bond fandom, the most legitimate way to do it is to pick a map in multiplayer, switch it to slappers only, and duke it out that way. That's the way to solve all problems. So anytime somebody comes to you and actually says, I don't like Daniel Craig, or Sean Connery is the GOAT, or if you're somebody that really wants to tick me off, saying things like, yeah, Casino Royale from 2006 is an absolute piece of junk, worst movie in the series, then I will say to you, all right, next time I see you, we're going to do this. And this will be a universally binding decision. Whoever wins, slappers only on GoldenEye between you and me. Let's go. That's another reason why I'm a little miffed that this doesn't have the online component. I would love to be able to host multiplayer matches on this every so often and have a lot of you join me with that. Now, you can do it on the Switch, but you have to have the friend code thing. So it's not a true online multiplayer experience to me. And the initial Switch control scheme sucks. You have to remap the whole thing, which doesn't really take that long to do. I have beaten this game on there too, but man, I would rather not have to futz that much with just getting the game playable, particularly when the control scheme I feel like was based around Ocarina of Time and Super Mario 64, because I've played both of those games on the Switch Online expansion pass and have been able to get through both of those fine. No control problems. The problem here is, of course, the Z targeting for Ocarina of Time means that you're pushing the left trigger to shoot your guns here, and man, I can't get over that. And there's a couple of other button issues too. I'm a little interested as to why they made Oddjob so small, because look at the film. He's not really that small. He's only like just a tiny bit shorter than Sean Connery. All right, yes. Now we're going to do Aztec, and we will have a couple of the cheat codes on, again, just for the fun of it. We'll do Invincibility and the gold PP7. Now, I mentioned that throughout this game, there's just nods to the developers being big fans of Roger Moore. This is a big one. Earlier, you had, of course, the camera, which is from Moonraker, which Bond takes several pictures of throughout the game. But you also have the watch magnet, which, of course, is from Live and Let Die. So here, replicating the feel of Drax's Moonraker base is so friggin' cool. They even have the Drax logo there. This was definitely one of those, like, they could have just created a couple of their own levels not inspired by other movies or whatnot, and we would have been fine with it for the most part, but this was definitely the better option to do. If we're going to reward our players for playing on higher and higher difficulties, you know, instead of just the multiplayer characters and the cheat codes, which probably would have been enough for most people, we're going to give them extra levels. So in order to unlock the Moonraker base, if you've never done it before, you have to beat all of the main story campaign on Secret Agent. And then to unlock 00 Agent, you have to do the single player campaign again on 00 Agent. I don't remember if you have to do it for Aztec. This was always one of my favorite parts in the movie, where Bond comes into this big meeting room and it has all these computer and TV screens up on the walls. It's so wonderfully extravagant in that Ken Adam way that only he can do. So I remember when I watched the movie for the first time, Moonraker was one of the early Bond films that I saw because of this game. Like, I was just really interested in it. But when we got to the end of the movie, being able to see all of this stuff, I was like, oh, so awesome. Of course, this is the corridor that Jaws escorts Bond down and then throws into here with Holly Goodhead. I'm very happy that Holly does not show up in this level. I do not need a hostage to rescue, or some girl with another Moonraker laser just trying to screw up my day here. Even though I don't need it, because obviously I have the invincibility up, I'm still going to be showing where the one bit of body armor is that you can easily get to. There might be another one somewhere in the level, because of course there's two ways to get to here. This is the route most everybody else takes. The other one is if you go off of that bridge in the second area, you'll just fall down. And of course fall damage is not a thing in these games, so you'll just encounter Jaws much earlier. Now, killing Jaws is the turning point of this level because, of course, once you kill him out, then you start triggering out a whole bunch of guards coming through. So I try to make sure that, like, I've done everything I need to do before getting to him. So taking out these fixed gun emplacements, I found that the best way to do this, if possible, is to use your AR rifle, since it has bullets that can go through. You get Moonraker lasers first here, and if you can somehow get one of those first, that's going to be really helpful. But in case you can't, stand behind those boxes and just kind of determine where behind the boxes those fixed gun emplacements are going to be at, and that's how I would get at them. And I would do the same thing with the guards, too. And then for beating Jaws, there's actually a really simple cheese tactic here, which is you get him to go back to that area with the stairs on both sides, and as he's running up the stairs, he can't shoot at you. And so, just kind of troll him by going up and down the stairs on the other side, and just kind of keep that chasm between you and him, and you'll be able to take him out. He takes an insane amount of bullets, though. So I just switch over to my Moonraker laser at that point and just start pelting him. All right, double Moonraker laser, baby. There's something about this bit of music, too, because obviously the GoldenEye film, we're working off of Eric Serra's score, and there's a fair amount of flavor from that score built into this game, which they didn't have to do, but it worked very well in my mind. But here from Moonraker, obviously you could have been doing something with John Barry. I'm glad they really didn't, and I don't know how effective that would have been given the technical limitations they had to work with here. You know, even when they had orchestral scores on the N64, they tended to be heavily compressed and chopped up. I mentioned Shadows of the Empire much earlier, but that's a good example because the N64 version has basically 30 seconds of John Williams music or the original score done by Joel McNeely, and they looped that a whole bunch, and it's heavily compressed. It's got like hard stops in the music and cuts and whatnot, and it's not too distracting when you just put your mind in, back in, this is 1996, cut him a break here. I feel as though it's just better to be consistent with the rest of the game rather than try to replicate these movies exactly. I'm a little curious as to why they picked Moonraker of all movies to try to replicate with a bonus level here. I'm not saying I wanted to see necessarily For Your Eyes Only done here, but Moonraker's kind of an odd one because, especially at this time, it still very much had the stigma of being one of the worst Bond films ever made, and I mean, depending on who you talk to, it still is one of the worst Bond films ever made. But yeah, if I have to hold out against all the remaining guards, I do it here. I just hide myself back here, and it usually takes them long enough to get up the I keep saying elevator, to get up the ladder, and I can usually take them down pretty quickly. That's a cool end shot as well, just Bond watching the exhaust of the rocket. Kind of would have loved to have seen this version of Bond go to space and play in Drax's Moonraker complex, just high above the Earth. That would have been a real treat. Egyptian is a pretty original level, but it's definitely taking elements from other Roger Moore Bond films. Obviously, Live and Let Die is represented here because you have Baron Samedi. You have the Man with the Golden Gun with the Golden Gun, and then I've always felt that Spy Who Loved Me gets represented here too because, of course, we're in an Egyptian temple. So this was their way of paying tribute to them. It does mean that the other three Roger Moore films are kind of missing out, but, you know, at least A View to a Kill gets represented by letting you play as Mayday in the multiplayer. Thankfully, there's a couple of bits of full body armor here, so as to make this a little easier. But again, I really think that the hardest part of this level is just the stupid floor puzzle, because there's nothing in-game to tell you what the pattern is, or at least I haven't been able to find anything. And so it's a bit of either trial and error or somebody tells you what the pattern is to be able to get through this. And I'm always worried, even when I know I've done the pattern correctly, when I get to the end, because like all it takes is for Bond to have misstepped one tile, and then you get all the fixed gun emplacements, and there's just no way you're surviving being able to destroy all of them unless you're really clever. I also love that the amount of bullets you get for the Golden Gun goes down the higher you go up. On Agent difficulty, I think you get 100 bullets. Here you get 75, and I'm pretty sure on 00 Agent you get 50. And given that this is another infinitely respawning guard place if you're not careful, yeah. I do wonder what weapon Baron Samedi is supposed to be using here, because by the time you get to the end, it feels like he's shooting a Moonraker laser, but I know he's not actually having that. Excuse the pause here. My wife came in to talk to me about something, and I had to tell her, gotta wait a couple of minutes here. But that watch menu, man. Yeah, hardest trap beat of 97. I'm intrigued about it just going dark here for the final bit, and there's just this ominous laugh. It's just really interesting choice. So there are two ways to get to Baron Samedi. This is the easiest way for me. You just have to know where in the wall to hit the button. But there's another way where you actually go underneath the pyramid and the obelisk in order to get up to this other area. You may see it in the background that, like, there's another exit out of this room. That's where you would come up to find him. Okay, I mentioned way back in Frigate about all of these body death animations. Seriously, look at Baron Samedi here. So yeah, there it is. GoldenEye beaten once again on the Xbox Series. Not exactly the hardest of tasks for me, but always fun to go back to. I mean, yeah, since this was the thing that planted the seed for my Bond fandom, I have a lot of love, a lot of nostalgia for this game. There's a lot of commenters now that will say, like, this game just did not hold up or whatnot. The problem is that when you make a statement like that it doesn't hold up, they don't ever really go into detail as to what exactly they mean by that. What do you mean it doesn't hold up? Obviously, the graphics can't compare to later. The level design is going to be less sophisticated than what came later. Just the options you get to do. It's just a really weird statement to me. When I say a game doesn't hold up quite as well, what I'm usually talking about is just with the controls, just with the gameplay, if it feels stilted or whatnot. And if you were to play this on the original N64, obviously it's fairly archaic in what it's doing there. But because we have these modern re-releases of the game, thank goodness, it does translate a little bit better to me. And even still, there are just some games that no matter the era that they were in, no matter how dated that control scheme is, they just hold such an appeal for everybody. You know, nobody's seriously going back and looking at Super Mario Brothers 3 for the NES and saying, oh yeah, no, that dated horribly. No. Certainly, if I go into this expecting a modern shooter, that's not what I'm going to get. And it is still very much in the rudimentary days of first-person shooters for consoles, but GoldenEye to me is like Doom. Yeah, just about everything else that came afterwards took from it and reiterated on it and expanded upon it, but there's still nothing like going back to the original Doom, that simplicity of it, that straightforwardness. And I would say the same thing of GoldenEye here. It has that same appeal for me. And so while there are other Bond games that better capture the feeling of a Bond film, that are more complex mechanically, when it comes to pure, simple fun on a console for a James Bond game, this is the peak for me, and probably will remain so. Not so much just because of nostalgia, but because we just don't make games like that anymore. They've always got to have extra bells and whistles on it. This is almost like returning to an indie design game now, where the idea is to go back and try to recapture the magic of what we did before. We just don't do that anymore. Big budget games aren't really interested in doing that. And while there's a lot of good big budget games that come out, there's a lot of crap that come out with them too. And because they're so public, it seems to hit harder the lack of creativity here. GoldenEye was simply a very troubled game in development that kind of tumbled its way in, that kind of tripped and stumbled its way into success, just in terms of a finished project. And thankfully, it was the right time for this sort of a game. It proved a landmark in game development. And for us as Bond fans, or for just general public, the general public looking for multiplayer experiences or good shooting experiences or just good games in general, this came at the right time. And I don't think we'll ever quite be able to get the same sort of feeling again. And at the same time, maybe we shouldn't. Replicating what's come before usually proves how much you don't understand how this works. You're better off going off and doing your own thing, which is why, as much as I love this game, I don't necessarily want IO Interactive to try to be aping this game or anything like that. I think they've got a good thing going with their Bond series, and I am so excited to see what they come up with next. So yeah, anyways, thanks for joining me if you've made it to this far. And if you guys are interested in more things like this, I'd be happy to do that. I mean, I do have playthroughs of Agent Underfire and Nightfire that I could easily edit into something like this and give it a go. But yeah, thanks for joining me, and keep bonding out there.